You're in the midst of filming season 6. Can you share, obviously not giving anything away, what is probably the most challenging thing that you're dealing with right now?
To myself, man, I didn't get the first role. And then I looked again at the script. I'm like, wait, so Jesus got like 5 lines in the whole thing.
Happened, and I thought it was very bizarre. And I thought, what's going on? Like, this is unseasonably dry, you know.
Today, Jonathan Roumie walks on a stages filled with tens of thousands. His face is on billboards. His voice known across languages. But rewind the tape just a few years back, and you'll find a man sitting on the floor of a tiny apartment, holding an empty wallet with eyes full of tears. He wasn't famous then. He wasn't Jesus from The Chosen. He was just Jonathan, and he had no idea what was coming next. But he knew one thing. He had no one else. Only God. But that didn't make everything fall in shape at the snap of fingers. In fact, things got a lot worse after that realization.
L.A.
Yeah,
How
so
long?
years later, I moved to L.A. I moved to L.A. in 2010.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
And then there was a long up and down drought period in L.A., which
Drought.
happens to a lot of actors.
L.A. is a dry place.
It is a very dry place. This is true.
It's been droughts for decades in L.A.
In more ways than one.
So for 8 years, I struggled in L.A. before things turned around for me.
But you said, you said that life backed me into a corner in 2018 or so. How did that happen?
Well, I was trying to balance several different side jobs, and none of them were.
It was one of those mornings that didn't feel like morning at all. No birds chirping, no coffee brewing, just silence. Jonathan Roumie sat on the edge of his bed in Los Angeles, staring at the ceiling like it might offer an answer. His phone hadn't rung in weeks. His bank account was under $20, not even enough to pay rent.
Just do one thing and pursue acting. I had to do many different things, and so I had to spread my energy in a number of different ways just to survive. And it got to the point where I couldn't get arrested for the survival jobs. Like I would call up these folks that would hire me in a number of different contractor positions, and I couldn't. There was nothing happening, and for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, this happened, and I thought it was very bizarre. And I thought, what's going on? Like this is unseasonably dry. It was an unseasonable dry spell for me, with just trying to survive. And
his acting career had been mostly background parts, short lines, and dry spells. There were moments of hope, a commercial here, a voiceover there, but nothing that lasted. These were the kind of roles that paid just enough to keep going, but never quite enough to rest. And this was the day he ran out of just enough. He walked to the fridge, half a bottle of mustard, a tired apple. That's it.
I got to the point where I was completely out of money. I was massively in debt. I was out of food, and I didn't know what else to do.
So Jonathan did something he'd never thought about and hadn't done in a long while. He dropped to his knees, not dramatically or loudly, just quietly.
Dropped to my knees in prayer, and at that point, just pour my heart out to God and ask Him why He brought me to this place. If it wasn't for, this purpose to pursue acting full time, and I had got tastes of what a career could look like, but it never really panned out to anything beyond just an episode of television here and there. And
then he folded his hands and stared at the floor with just one line of prayer whispered from somewhere deep inside. God, I surrender. He didn't pray for money or ask for fame. He just gave up control, gave up trying to figure it out, gave up pretending he was okay. The room was still. The air felt heavy, and for the first time in weeks, his shoulders stopped shaking. He didn't know it yet, but that moment, knees on the floor, heart wide open, was not the end.
The day I experienced this financial miracle that to me was a sign that the moment I let go of the control that I had imposed upon myself, imposed upon my career, to try to be responsible for everything that took place, for everything that happened. The moment I let go of that, and I gave it over to God, that's when things turned around, like that very day, in a very dramatic way.
That was just the beginning, because 6 months later, a role would find him. A role that would change his life. But first, he had to let go and trust that maybe God was still listening. After that moment on the floor, something in Jonathan Roumie changed.
And resilience and an ability to survive that I think you don't get too many other places. It's a challenge. So I grew up mostly in the suburbs. I started in the city, moved to the suburbs, ended up back in the city, and the city was my speed. It just felt right to me, and I felt like this is what.
He still didn't have the money he needed. His fridge wasn't suddenly full. His phone didn't ring with big opportunities overnight. But his heart was different now. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't trying to carry it all alone. Life kept moving slowly. He auditioned, he prayed, he went to mass, and he waited. That was the hardest part, the waiting. Not just for a job, but for direction, for purpose, for peace that would last longer than a Sunday. Some mornings, he'd wake up and wonder if anything would ever change. But he stayed faithful, quietly faithful. He stopped trying to fix everything and started talking to God more honestly. Not with big words, just small ones like, I trust you. Even now, no one around him really knew how low things had gotten. He didn't make a show of it, but deep down, he had let go of the chase. The dreams were still there, but they weren't what kept him going anymore. He was no longer chasing success. He was chasing surrender. And one day, something in him clicked. He stood in his kitchen, looked out the window, and felt something new, readiness. Not for fame, not for recognition, just readiness to do whatever God asked of him, even if it meant staying small forever. That's when the email came. It started like any other day, with another email and another audition.
The person who made that call was a friend and a colleague by that point, a guy by the name of Dallas Jenkins, who created The Chosen. And I had played Jesus for him for his church's Good Friday service in these little vignettes 3 times over the course of 4 years between 2014 and 2017.
Just literally in a church.
In a church. So we'd go and shoot out on a farm, these vignettes, whatever, built sets into this. In his church has like a little studio, and so we would, but mostly on location, we would film these little.
Jonathan Roumie had done this countless times. Print the sides, read the lines, hit record, submit, wait, pray, repeat. But this one felt strange. At the top of the page was The Chosen, a series about Jesus and his disciples. Another Jesus project, he thought. He had played the role before, once in a small production, once in a sketch. But this script, something about it felt alive. Like someone had actually opened the Gospels and wept over them. Like someone believed every word.
That traveling show started 5 years before The Chosen.
Yeah.
6 months after I filmed my portion of that show, because it was essentially projected behind the actress on a screen.
Yeah.
So this actress would essentially interact with the characters on the screen,
Right.
of which I was playing
You were Jesus,
for
yeah.
the first time.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I auditioned for a short film for Dallas Jenkins, the creator of The Chosen, about the 2 thieves, called The 2 Thieves, crucified alongside Jesus. And
How did you meet him? How did that happen?
He filmed the audition from his living room, alone, with the same furniture he once knelt beside when rent was late. He prayed after he sent it, not to be picked, just that it would bless someone. Weeks passed. Then, one quiet afternoon, his phone rang. He got the part. Jesus. He was not extra number 4, not shopkeeper, not guard, but Jesus.
I said, hey, here's a short film audition. It was like they would pay me something crazy, like a few $100 a day, and they would fly me out. I'm like, I'd love to get flown out for a job. Like it was.
Why not?
Why not? That was big time for me at the time. And so I auditioned, and I auditioned initially for one of the thieves, which I didn't get because 2 days later, after that audition, they said, hey, they want you to read for Jesus. And I'm like, Jesus got like 5 lines. The thief, the penitent thief is like his whole arc. It's all about the penitent thief. It's an amazing arc, but I had just played Jesus in the traffic show, and I thought, I'd love to play Jesus again. Maybe see what I can come up with this time.
And at that moment, he didn't jump or shout. He sat still, completely still, like someone still processing what that breakthrough meant. Because deep in his heart, he knew this wasn't random stuff. It was divine.
And believe the things that my faith told me that I believe, that were true. If I didn't believe them, then why practice my faith? But if I was practicing my faith, then I had to really examine whether or not I believed those things were true. Did I believe that God is in charge of my life? Do I stand on his promises for all the things that he said, that if I give him my burdens and my yoke, that he can carry it for me or with me? And do I trust him? Do I trust him in the unknown, in the circumstances that are sometimes overwhelming and beyond me? And when I could finally answer truthfully and wholly and completely, yes, I trust him, that's when everything changed.
Yeah.
All his struggle, the silence, the loneliness, every prayer whispered through tears, it all had been preparing him for this. He didn't have a big resume or fancy credits, but he had scars, and they taught him surrender. So when the cameras started rolling, it wasn't just Jonathan stepping onto the set. It was a man who had met Jesus, now walking in his sandals.
Narrative arc. And then, and I thought I'd had a great audition. It was in LA at the time. And I knew it was an opportunity to get paid a nominal stipend for some work in another city, in this case, suburban Chicago. And I thought, man, I would audition for this short film. I don't care if it's for a church. It's a great story. Its script is great. So I go and I audition. I had a great audition. I'm like, I think I nailed it. A couple of days later, I get a call back to come back in, but this time to read for Jesus. And I thought to myself, man, I didn't get the first role. And then I looked again at the script. I'm like, wait, so Jesus got like 5 lines in the whole thing.
Jonathan Roumie didn't just play Jesus. He became someone who understood what it meant to walk through pain, loneliness, and complete dependence on God. That's why the role fit like skin. He wasn't stepping into a costume. He was stepping into something he had already lived through.
Jesus 6 months prior for another completely independent project up in Washington State at a studio for this Catholic company called St. Luke Productions about this saint in the early 20th century named St. Faustina, who was considered a mystic. She had these visions. She wrote an entire diary that was sort of dictated to her by Christ himself in these visions. And so I played Jesus in the vision aspect of that story for this traveling one-woman show where it was an actress playing the saint, a screen behind her, a couple of rudimentary set pieces, and then
Every scene in The Chosen felt like something more than just television. The miracles, the tears, the teachings, he had wept like that before. He had questioned like that before. He had waited on God like that before. And so, when he spoke the words of Christ, there was no distance between the lines and the heart.
I go and I audition for Jesus because I'm like, you know what? I enjoyed playing Jesus 6 months ago. Like, this would be cool if I got anything, it'd be cool because I wasn't working steadily or consistently. And the way Dallas tells the story, about 10 seconds into the audition, he's like, that's Jesus. That's my Jesus for this show. And so we did that film. And it was screened. He brought me back to view it like a month later at the Good Friday service with his church. About 7 services. It was like 15,000 people saw this thing in a matter of a day and a half. And it was remarkably well received. It was...
Crew members said they felt something different. Extras cried during filming. Other actors stopped and asked him how he stayed so calm between takes. The truth? He wasn't acting calm. He was anchored. He kept praying quietly behind the scenes. Sometimes during lunch. Sometimes right before a scene. Not for the show to succeed, but for God to use it, even if no one ever knew his name. There were moments on set when he could feel God so close, he had to hold back tears, especially during scenes like the healing of Mary Magdalene or the Sermon on the Mount, because he remembered what it felt like to be healed, to be rescued when no one saw.
Some people would feel like that's a pretty heavy role. It's Jesus.
Yeah.
Basis of the world's largest religion.
Yeah.
God himself, according to Christians. Did you ever feel that on you? Like, that's a lot.
In the first season, I did. There was this moment, especially, which I've kind of talked about at times, where, and I think it still sort of affects me. I actually like telling the story because it's a reminder for me to remember what it's all about and who I'm serving as I endeavor to portray this role.
The cameras caught Jesus, but the crew saw Jonathan. And what they saw was a man changed. Not by fame, not by money, but by a season of nothing that turned into everything. Now, Jonathan Roumie stands in stadiums. He speaks at pro-life marches, at Eucharistic congresses, and at prayer gatherings. His voice echoes through sound systems, and people cheer like he's a rock star. But if you ask him about the fame, he'll probably smile and shake his head. Because in his heart, he's still the man who once knelt on his floor, broke, and whispered to God through tears. He never forgets that moment. It wasn't just a memory. It was a door. Whenever he walks into new rooms, he remembers the quiet room with no answers. When he stands before cameras, he remembers the silence when no one called. He still carries that hunger, not for applause, but for presence.
We were about midway through the first season, and the time came for me as Jesus to start preaching, full-on sermons. And we started filming. And then as I was going through these words, I suddenly, it's like I kind of felt I was outside of myself, listening to myself preach to a crowd outside the doors of in our story, Zebedee, James and John's father, Zebedee's house. And there was a crowd of people that was a growing crowd of onlookers, and our wonderful background act.
And now he tells others the truth he learned the hard way. God waits until you're empty so he can fill you. He waits until you've run out, so you know it's him who shows up.
So, yeah, I'll have Jonathan answer about performing, but we've known this was coming for a long time. Season 6, which is what we're filming right now. We're actually leaving for out of the country in just a couple days. And for the first 5 seasons, we've had to, you can talk about this, but he's had to portray it as though we can't be thinking about the crucifixion the entire time that we're filming the show. And Jesus still had so many other things in his ministry that were extremely important and that we really wanted to get right. We get people saying, do you have any fear about this season? Or this is the really important season? You really got to get this right. I'm like, we felt that way from day one.
Roumie's story is not about getting famous for playing Jesus. It's about becoming someone who needs Jesus every day, more than ever. When people ask how he stayed grounded, his answer is simple. He never left the floor. What if the moment you feel most forgotten is the moment God is about to whisper your name? Jonathan Roumie once had nothing, just a floor, a prayer, and a whisper of hope. That's where God met him. And maybe that's where God is waiting for you too. He may not meet you at the top of your dreams. It could be at the bottom of your surrender. Kindly drop a comment if you've ever had a moment like that. And share this with someone who needs to know, when all you have is God, you're not empty. You're finally ready